Joe Goldberg, the protagonist of the psychological thriller You, provides a lens into the darker side of human nature and the complexities of obsession, morality, and perception. He is a paradoxical figure, simultaneously terrifying and captivating. Despite being a stalker and serial killer, many viewers find themselves engrossed in his story, even sympathizing with him at times. This contradiction raises important questions about moral boundaries, cognitive biases, and the psychology of audience engagement with dark characters. Why do people find Joe compelling, even when they recognize the moral reprehensibility of his actions? The answer lies in a combination of narrative techniques, psychological mechanisms, and societal biases that shape perception. Yu cleverly plays on the duality of his persona, someone who commits heinous acts, yet convinces himself that he is acting out of love. This complexity makes him a fascinating character study, keeping viewers engaged as they try to understand his motivations. Joe exemplifies the antihero archetype, morally ambiguous, flawed, yet deeply engaging. Unlike a traditional villain, he is introspective, articulate, and emotionally complex. He is positioned within the ranks of other famous antiheroes, such as Walter White in Breaking Bad or Dexter Morgan in Dexter, characters who engage the audience by revealing glimpses of humanity alongside their criminal tendencies. Joe is intelligent and well-read, often referencing literature and philosophy, which creates the illusion of sophistication and depth. His internal monologues position him as a man of thought rather than an impulsive killer. Because he believes himself to be a protector rather than a predator, he reframes his murders as necessary evils rather than acts of malice. This form of self-justification aligns with moral disengagement theory, which explains how individuals rationalize unethical actions to maintain a positive self-image. Immersed in Joe's point of view, the audience may also experience a form of moral disengagement, making it easier to overlook or excuse his actions. This tendency is further explained by cognitive dissonance theory, which suggests that when people feel discomfort due to conflicting thoughts, such as being drawn to a character who commits horrific acts, they unconsciously adjust their perceptions. To resolve the contradiction, viewers may emphasize Joe's intelligence, charm, or tragic past, allowing them to see him as less evil than he truly is. One of the most significant reasons for Joe's appeal is the storytelling technique that places the audience inside his mind. By structuring the show through Joe's internal monologue, Yu fosters an illusion of intimacy between him and the audience. This perspective aligns with parasocial relationship theory, which explains how audiences form one-sided emotional connections with fictional characters. Studies on perspective taking further suggest that when individuals are exposed to someone's thoughts and reasoning, they naturally develop empathy, even if that person is morally questionable. This is what Yu manipulates effectively. By filtering every event through Joe's lens, the show deprives viewers of alternative perspectives, leading them to process events as he does. This selective storytelling also reinforces confirmation bias, where people accept information that aligns with their current beliefs while ignoring contradictory evidence. Because viewers only see what Joe sees, his manipulative tendencies are often obscured, allowing audiences to rationalize or even justify his actions. The show challenges viewers to question their own moral boundaries. By placing them inside Joe's psyche, you blurs the lines between protagonist and antagonist, creating a unique and immersive experience. This narrative technique forces audiences to wrestle with their perceptions of right and wrong, making Joe both repelling and captivating. Joe fits the Dark Prince archetype, a trope commonly found in Gothic literature where a brooding, intense, and obsessive figure devotes himself to the object of his affection. Characters like Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights or Edward Cullen in Twilight exhibit similar possessive and controlling behaviors, yet are often perceived as romantic rather than toxic. This phenomenon aligns with research on obsessive love and its misinterpretation as passion. Psychological studies indicate that people often mistake obsessive behaviors for deep emotional devotion, particularly in fictional contexts where real-world consequences are absent. Joe's overwhelming fixation on his love interests is framed at least initially, as a form of intense, undying love rather than coercive control. Additionally, the halo effect plays a role in how Joe is perceived. Because he is physically attractive, intelligent, and articulate, audiences may subconsciously attribute other positive qualities to him, overlooking his violent tendencies. Attractiveness. Bias is well documented in psychology, showing that people tend to judge attractive individuals as more trustworthy and competent, even when they engage in morally reprehensible behavior. From a psychological perspective, Joe Goldberg exhibits traits that align with obsessive compulsive disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial tendencies. Throughout You, he often justifies his manipulative and obsessive behaviors as acts of love, reinforcing the patterns commonly associated with these disorders. While the show does not offer an official diagnosis, both mental health professionals and fans have analyzed his character through this lens. Joe's obsessive tendencies are particularly evident in the way he fixates on his romantic interests. His compulsive stalking and constant need to monitor their every move reflect behaviors often associated with obsessive compulsive disorder. His belief that his actions are necessary for love and protection further fuels this obsession, making it difficult for him to recognize the harm he causes. At the same time, Joe's manipulative nature and lack of empathy suggest traits of narcissistic personality disorder and antisocial behavior. He consistently places himself at the center of every situation, believing that he alone understands what is best for the people in his life. His charm and intelligence allow him to deceive others, while his grandiose self-image reinforces his belief that he is morally superior to those around him. This aligns with narcissistic personality disorder, which is characterized by a need for admiration and an inability to consider others' emotions in a meaningful way. Ultimately, You presents a complex and unsettling character study, blending psychological depth with gripping storytelling. Joe's personality traits make him both intriguing and disturbing, forcing audiences to question their perceptions of morality, love, and obsession. Joe's appeal also highlights societal biases in how we perceive crime and morality, particularly when gender and attractiveness are involved. Studies on crime perception indicate that physically attractive or well-spoken male criminals are often judged less harshly than their female or less conventionally attractive counterparts. This is known as the good-looking villain effect, where physically attractive individuals are perceived as more trustworthy and less dangerous, even when they commit violent crimes. This bias explains why Joe, despite his brutal actions, is still viewed by some as a tragic or even desirable figure. The bad boy trope in media also reinforces cultural narratives that equate possessiveness with deep love. Many films and books romanticize dangerous men, portraying their obsessive behaviors as a testament to their emotional intensity rather than red flags of abuse. Do audiences truly like Joe Goldberg? Rather than a genuine admiration for Joe Goldberg as an individual, audiences are drawn to the psychological and narrative complexities he represents. His character is crafted within a framework of cognitive biases, unreliable narration, and psychological manipulation, making it difficult to view him purely as a villain. Ultimately, You serves as an exploration of the power of perspective, demonstrating how, with the right narrative framing, even a serial killer can be made to seem compelling, sympathetic, and disturbingly likable. This unsettling realization forces audiences to confront the way storytelling influences perception, raising broader questions about morality, manipulation, and the psychology of media consumption. Watching You has been a fascinating yet unsettling experience for me. Joe Goldberg is a character who constantly challenges my perception of morality, making me question how easily storytelling can manipulate my sympathies. Despite knowing that he is a stalker, a murderer, and an undeniably toxic person, I still find myself engrossed in his story, trying to understand his motivations. That realization alone forced me to reflect on how narrative perspective can shape the way we view even the most reprehensible actions. One of the things that stands out to me the most is how You places me inside Joe's mind. His internal monologue, his justifications, and his twisted logic make me feel almost complicit in his actions. I don't approve of what he does, yet I understand why he believes he is acting out of love, protection, or justice. This constant push and pull between knowing that he is a villain and yet being drawn into his perspective is what makes the show so powerful. It forces me to confront my own biases and consider how easily someone can be framed as the hero if we only see the story from their point of view. Joe's obsession with love and control is another aspect that makes me reflect on real-life relationships. The way he convinces himself that his actions are justified, that he is simply loving too hard, mirrors the kind of rationalizations often seen in toxic relationships. It makes me think about how often unhealthy behaviors are romanticized in media, how possessiveness, manipulation, and obsession are sometimes mistaken for passion. Watching You has made me more aware of these narratives and how they can distort our understanding of love and devotion. Psychologically, Joe is a fascinating character study. His obsessive tendencies, his narcissistic traits, and his complete lack of self-awareness create a compelling yet disturbing portrayal of someone who truly believes they are the hero of their own story. It's unsettling to watch him excuse his behavior, and yet at times I find myself analyzing him rather than outright condemning him. That in itself is a reflection of how You manipulates its audience, how it plays with our empathy and forces us to examine the power of perspective. Overall, You has made me think about more than just Joe Goldberg. It has made me question the way I consume stories, how easily I can be led to sympathize with the wrong person, and how society often romanticizes dangerous behaviors when they come from someone charming or intelligent. It's a reminder that even in fiction, perspective is everything, and sometimes that perspective can be disturbingly misleading.